Yeah, all he had to do was give that Nazi salute. Now they're trying to give him $1 trillion. People think Tesla's an electric car company. I don't think Tesla's an electric car company. I think Tesla is a fascism company. It seems like what Tesla's trying to do is make Elon Musk the most powerful man in the world, using this corporation as a shell and a cover for that. That pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty attitude precedes a fall. If you want one of us, you're going to have to come through all of us. And I think we need more of that spirit.
They're telling you the plot, Gil, that they don't have the numbers, that they realize they can't win the normal way. Yeah, the wealthy Lafayette folks were happy. So I'm like, all right.
Well, most of them were. There was a couple who were very upset about some of the stuff, the Israel stuff.
Oh yeah, did they talk to you afterwards?
No, everyone was gone by the time I got my backpack. So
yeah, no one told me. Well, what had to be said had to be said. I'm talking to Gil about when we last saw each other, which was Tuesday, where Gil was kind enough to moderate a conversation with me for the Commonwealth Club, and that was on election night. And we were checking our phones backstage. We're like, all right, I wonder what's going to happen. And the results came in right before we went on stage. Mamdani won by nearly double-digit points. Virginia got the trifecta. And since we were in California, we were waiting for Prop 50. I thought it'd be 60-40. Ended up being 65-35. And we were in front of an audience, which was a very receptive audience, a great audience, that didn't like everything that we said, especially when when I criticized Israel and its genocide, but we also talked about the broligarchy and how California, my home state, where Gil is right now, where I spent 32 years of my life, yes, it's leading the resistance, but at the same time has to confront and acknowledge that it has literally created Bond supervillains who are essentially on the verge of destroying the earth and gobbling up all of our milkshakes. And the timing of this conversation, because I asked Gil, who is the editor of the fantastic Nerdreich, which you should all subscribe to, and also the forthcoming author of the book Nerdreich, which is out when, Gil? August?
Probably in August, probably summertime sometime.
Summertime. Yeah, and he's taken time out to do this because he has to finish the book. But Gil has been on top of the broligarchy, the Silicon Valley Bond villains, the techno-fascists, the techno-humanists, their endgame, Curtis Yarvin, their philosopher king. He's been on it for a while. And his warnings and what he's been writing now are coming to fruition, and people are paying attention to it. They're like, oh, maybe we should read about Gil. And Gil has shared this amazing chart, reshared it, which I'll have, called the Authoritarian Tech Network, the Kingmakers. You got Peter Thiel as the architect, ideologue of accelerationism, Mark Andreessen, Elon Musk, the voice of right-wing techno-populism. You got David Sachs, the crypto czar. You got Palantir there as well. Some good old surveillance state stuff. We're going to get into all of it, but before we do and talk about our new tech overlords, let's say hello to our new trillionaire overlord, Elon Musk. Things will get so much better, right, Gil, with a trillionaire?
Yeah, all he had to do was give that Nazi salute. Now they're trying to give him $1 trillion. People think Tesla's an electric car company. I don't think Tesla's an electric car company. I think Tesla is a fascism company, right? How in the world has that led to this? It's ridiculous. And if you look at how these things add up, I mean, it just makes no sense. It seems like what Tesla's trying to do is make Elon Musk the most powerful man in the world, using this corporation as a shell and a cover for that. But it makes absolutely no sense. That Nazi salute should have been the end of Elon Musk's career. It should have been the end of him being welcomed in polite society or regarded as a genius. But the audacity of trying to make Elon Musk a trillionaire reminds me of a line from the Bible that that pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty attitude precedes a fall. So I think Silicon Valley and even companies like Tesla, which a lot of liberals think is a good company that's done good things, are gonna find out real soon here in the future. When you look at what the results were on election night, the people who think this country is about to become fascist should be a little terrified right now.
And we're from the Bay, and we We were honest. We were blunt. I called them out. I said, "All right, you all think you're liberals, but you drive your Teslas. You all think you're liberals, but you work, in Silicon Valley. You all think you're liberals, but you step over the homeless people, and then you think you're gonna be leading the resistance while still sucking at the teat of the broligarchy. It doesn't work that way." And I do think the juxtaposition of what you just said. Right here, we have this blue tsunami where clearly, Gil, the people are frustrated and fed up, and things are going to get far worse when it comes to the economy. We see all the metrics, and then literally right after Mamdani wins, 75% of Tesla shareholders are like, you know what'll be really great just for PR? Let's vote to make Elon Musk a trillionaire. Uh, this, I feel like the bubble's bound to burst. Am I being too optimistic here, Gil?
No, I think we need a lot of room for optimism, and I think that's what election night was about. One thing I've been thinking about, I come from mainstream Democratic politics. I worked for Jerry Brown, Dianne Feinstein, Kamala Harris, Antonio Villaraigosa, pretty mainstream Democrats. And one thing we always say about the left and democratic socialists is, oh, they can't really do that. They can't really have free grocery stores. You can't really have single payer healthcare. You always make it clear that the reality doesn't add up for anything that is positive, that is popular, and that would really help people. We have to negotiate to some middle ground with the Republicans. That's always the line. But why is it that billionaires get to imagine life on Mars and eternal life and a post-American fascist techno- technocratic monarchy, but no one else gets to imagine anything like daycare, like things that people need? And so I think what we need to do is start to turn the tide and shift the vibe so that these fascists are the ones who are afraid. And we are the ones full of spirit and energy and optimism and some visions for the future. I've been thinking about what does accountability look like for the people who were complicit in this effort to overthrow American democracy. What can we do in the future to make sure that the system doesn't allow for this kind of treachery and that it actually tilts power more to the people? That's the lesson we have to have coming out of this. So I think we have to be more optimistic, while at the same time acknowledging this is a struggle. And by the way, the whole entire 21st century is going to be a struggle, right? Even when we
Absolutely.
beat these guys, it doesn't end. We're trying to save the planet. They're going to come back. They're going to have trillionaires, all of that. So it's going to be an endless fight. It's going to be one battle after another through the 21st century. But I think we have to start being on the side of the people who are excited, optimistic, and know that we can win. Steve Bannon was yesterday worrying that he's going to end up in prison if
Yep.
Democrats win the midterm elections. Well, that says two things. A, there's going to be midterm elections, right? And that these guys are starting to worry that they don't have the wind at their back anymore, that their shock and awe has failed. And as Mamdani said when he won, if you want one of us, you're going to have to come through all of us. And I think we need more of that spirit in democratic politics and in anti-fascist politics here in the United States.
And speaking about fascism, I don't know if you saw. I mean, I've been going since 12, but Donald Trump, who fell asleep yesterday, literally as what was the guy? Oz was talking about sleep and dementia, can't make the shut up, and who sat there and just did nothing as a man collapsed behind him. And then RFK, our director of health and human services, I don't know if you saw on the video. I mean, just on the nose. You can't get more on the nose than some of the images and videos we've seen in the past week. RFK, our director of health and human services, as soon as he saw that man pass out, he literally ran in the opposite direction. It's like if you want to see corruption and the broligarchy and Donald Trump and the Trump administration and literally what they've done to America, and much like the Great Gatsby quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald, these wealthy and powerful people were reckless and careless and crushed things and then just went back to their carelessness. Literally, you're seeing that, and they're throwing Great Gatsby parties as lines are here in Virginia at food banks, and the government remains shut down. And they're like, "What? Huh?" And then Donald Trump in his Nora O'Donnell interview, where Barry Weiss was hovering like a hawk, so Nora O'Donnell, when asked too many tough questions, said, "Well, yeah, grocery prices are high. What about the 401k? They could just use their 401k." The callous indifference and cruelty. Here, Donald Trump, about 2 hours ago, said on ending the filibuster, "If we do it, we will never lose the midterms and we will never lose a general election. It would be impossible to lose an election." They're telling you the plot. They're telling you the plot, Gil, that they don't have the numbers, that they realize they can't win the normal way, that they have to gerrymander, that they have to end mail-in voting. And now Steve Bannon is telling you that, oh shit, we've probably done some illegal stuff. which is why, he's probably worried about jail time. And furthermore, Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem are living in army bases. Totally normal, right, Gil, for people who feel like they have a mandate?
Well, they've got a tremendous amount of paranoia, and they must be under an increasing amount of psychological pressure as they see the polls shift against them. And they're fantasizing about a way to not have democracy anymore. But I think the other problem that they have is that I don't think that most of corporate America or even most billionaires really want to go along with a seditious and treasonous effort to overthrow the United States, which, if they fail, and there's a big chance they would fail, would result in either lifelong prison terms or even execution. Right? I don't think most people want to sign up for that. The reason corporate America is being so silent right now is because they're cowardly. They don't want to take a side. If Trump wins, they'll be on that side. If he loses, they want to be on the other side, right? So I don't think they have buy-in from the elites. It's been too much of a clown show so far. And so I think that's the signal that Bannon's trying to send. They're trying to send up these panic signals. But when you're begging to end the filibuster, when that's what you're banking your hopes on, then it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, they're counting on what's holding this nation together. Apparently, is the comity of the Senate, and what you have in the Senate is Republicans who know that, well, probably we're not going to have a complete fascist takeover. There's going to be elections. We're going to be held accountable, and if Democrats take the Senate and there's no filibuster, then all bets are off, right? And that's a big risk for them. So the fact that the Republicans still consider this a risk, and the fact that Trump and Bannon are begging the Senate to end the filibuster, shows you that they really don't have it. I mean, why don't you just send troops into the Senate and say there's no more filibuster, right? Go ahead and be the dictator. Can't quite do that. The numbers aren't there. The polls are falling. Grandpa's asleep half the time. So I think they're in a bit of a pickle. And I think people need to realize that because there's this sort of doom and gloom. I'd say 10% of the population on social media, it's like, oh, it's a fascist country, we've lost, all this weak, weepy stuff. That's not the attitude to have at all. These people are weak. They should be scared. They're going to fail, and we're going to make sure that they fail. And once they fail, we're going to find ways to hold them accountable. I think we need to talk more about that. And I think it would help if some of the Democrats would start talking at the billionaires in a more direct and threatening way. I think what we saw with Mamdani, one of the big things he did differently was that he did not kowtow and bow down to billionaires. Many of them were after him. Elon Musk, Bill Ackman, all these people were firing on Mamdani and his ideas. He did not back down. And we need more leaders who are willing to put billionaires on the defensive and to go after what they're doing right now, because there's a lot of people complicit in this. But I think the message I'm hearing from Trump and them is that, they're basically begging to end the filibuster, and that won't work either, by the way, right? Go ahead, the pendulum will swing, unless you're going to end the filibuster, and then what? Then what are you going to do? Make Trump president for life? The Senate can't do that. So, I think they're in an increasingly tight pickle. And I think a lot of people are realizing they don't have a fully fleshed out plan for how to do this. They're sort of making it up as they go. And that's a problem if you're trying to get people to buy in on your fascist overthrow of democracy.
But the problem is, though, they still have the complicity of the broligarchy and corporate media. They still have Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and their groomed henchman, JD Vance. What we saw is the broligarchy, the technocrats, the right wing, and even the Democratic establishment throw everything and the kitchen sink and a Bill Clinton at Mamdani, and it still failed, Gil. And these people are now both melting down, number one, but also, I don't know if you saw a shift, to stay with your type of hopeful moment here, where these people also respect power and bend the knee to power. Did you see the remarkable shift of Bill Ackman after
Totally.
Mamdani won?
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
They only respect power. They only answer to power. And Democrats have to start acting powerful. And so do we, right? And that's not all there is to it, like imagining things. But that's something that's very important to them, is they have this idea of hyperstition. We've talked about this before. It's kind of like there was a book on this in the 90s, The Secret. And even before that, there was a book, The Power of Positive Thinking. A lot of these broligarchs are into the idea that if you imagine a future and you tell stories about that future, you can make that future happen. And I think that's what we need to do more of as well, and not let the billionaires monopolize the imagination about what the future is going to be. And so what Mamdani has been able to do by winning is force these guys to realize the limits of their own power. Just because you have billions of dollars doesn't mean you get to decide who the mayor is, or who the governor is, or who the president is. Sure, there's an election where Trump won and they've got their little configuration. They're trying to make it happen, but it's really unpopular and it's not looking good for them. I'd much rather be in our shoes right now than theirs. And believe me, I know a lot about these guys, their capabilities, their money, their networks, but that doesn't add up to everything in the world, right? They couldn't stop Mamdani from getting elected mayor, right? Taking over the entire nation, ending democracy, and then taking over the world is a much taller order than a municipal mayoral race. So I think we got to give ourselves some credit for the power that we do have. And when you see Bill Ackman trying to suck up to Mamdani after warning everybody it's the end of the world if he wins, you see how easily they are defeated. And really what it comes down to is these guys are not that smart and they're not courageous at all. They're very cowardly. The moment there's enough pushback, they will crumble. And maybe not Elon Musk because he's gone way over the edge, but we see some cracks in their coalition.
And we have to exploit the cracks to learn from the British divide and conquer, except against brown and black people, now against the broligarchy and MAGA. And speaking about cowards and how they are all these timid, weak men with weak jaws and weak knees who project strength but are actually terrified little boys, Curtis Yarvin. For those who don't know, I think it's very important for people to just connect the dots, and we'll spend a little bit of time, right? Because what's common to Gil isn't common to everyone. You said that you actually met Curtis Yarvin at some cafe. You ran into him like in Emeryville. Can you tell people why I'm bringing up Curtis Yarvin when it comes to cowardice and how he's connected to the broligarchy and what he said to you when you said hi to him?
Well, Curtis Yarvin, probably people have read something or heard the name. He was this blogger in the early 2000s who started blogging about the need to replace American democracy with monarchy or with a corporate dictatorship, and that basically tech CEOs should run the world. And he was an anonymous troll, but Peter Thiel took an interest in his work and promoted him and funded him for many years. And lo and behold, in 2024, JD Vance, who's a big fan of Yarvin's work, becomes vice president. And you see the ideas of Yarvin being directly enacted through Doge, essentially, because Yarvin said that a president in the future should use dictatorial power, install a CEO to purge the federal government, which is exactly what happened with Doge. And even the Washington Post has written a story now saying that that's what happened, that it was that Doge was influenced by Yarvin. So, he's a guy who's behind a lot of these ideas on a philosophical level. And the only thing he's really doing is repackaging much older ideas from fascism, authoritarianism, an idea called accelerationism, that we should accelerate, that tech should be leading the way into the future. And so it's amazing. This is one of the things that they hyperstitioned, right? Peter Thiel finds this obscure blogger with these terrible anti-American ideas, promotes him, and then boom, now he's this widely quoted philosopher. The New York Times did a big interview with him with a bunch of black and white glamour shots. But I'm writing about Curtis Yarvin in my book. My book's going to trace where these ideas come from and how this set of very obscure anti-American ideas was promoted and pushed by a small circle of Silicon Valley billionaires until it became our reality. So I'm going to tell the story of that ideology. And I've been trying to interview Yarvin. We've had some back and forth on email, but he finally quieted down. He won't give me an interview. He wants to do a public debate, but I don't believe in doing public debates with people like Curtis Yarvin. For one thing, he just talks nonstop, so there's no such thing as a debate. But I was going to get a bagel the other day, and there he was on the sidewalk. And so, I said, "Hey, Curtis," and he kind of winced, like I don't know what he thought was going to happen. He was almost relieved to find out it was me. I think, I'm not sure I would be diddy bopping around Oakland if I were the most famous tech fascist philosopher in the United States. At the same time, it shows the civility and safety and security of the progressive regime that you can feel safe, wandering around Telegraph Avenue.
The hellscape of California, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was even a little rougher stretch of town, actually. But I just told him that it'd be in his best interest to talk to me, and otherwise, other people will tell the story, which they currently are. I don't expect him to respond, but it was sort of an interesting coincidence.
And he's also Curtis Yarvin has tried to leave. He's talked about leaving. He's talked about leaving America. So here's the man who's the ideological architect who Peter Thiel has used his half-baked ideas to accelerate their techno-fascist agenda. And the push comes to shove. Now Curtis Yarvin, who's an idiot and clearly not well like most of these people, is now threatening to leave America. And then, Gil says hi to him and he starts wincing. It reminds me of when I met Stephen Miller. I've shared the story before. A couple of months ago, I was going to Tyson's with my kid. We're going to the Lego store, and this chutia was right in front of me. Chutia is an exquisite swear word that you all should use from the South Asia. And there were two black SUVs, which means that he was using taxpayer dollars for those two black SUVs. He didn't get in the front. He was in the back, which means he had a driver, Gil, and he also had security. And then he put his horrible wife in the car, and they were shopping at Macy's. Oh, having a great time. And this was right after news was published that over 200 men were kidnapped and detained and sent to die in a foreign prison. So I was sitting there and I had to cross the street. And like there was my wife, who's a smart one, that voice was like, "Wow, just keep going." But then the dumbass known as Wajhatili is like, I cannot resist. And so with the big yellow Lego bag, on the sidewalk. I'm not stupid. I didn't yell. I didn't get in his face, but he's right there in front of me, just right there, right in front of me, getting in the car. He's not 5'10". And I said, "Hey, Steven, you're hurting families. Stop it." And then he stopped. He stopped getting in and he went like this. Wouldn't look me in the eye, Gil. I said, "Hey, Steven." I said, "Stop it. You're hurting families." Still wouldn't look me in the eye. Right. And then his bodyguard ran up and said, "You have to keep moving, sir." And I'm like, "I'm on a sidewalk." He goes, "You have to keep moving." And then I remember I stared at her and there was a part of me, but I'm like, my son's here. I'm like, yeah, okay. And I gave it like a little second beat, looked her in the eyes, and I walked away. These men are cowards. That's the point I'm trying to say. These men are small and weak. When you see them in person, you're like, really? You're the big, bad, scary boogeyman? No, you're not. You're just a weak freak, just like Curtis Yarvin, just like Elon Musk, and just like Peter Thiel. Let's talk about this freak named Peter Thiel, whom you have said is the architect of the tech network. His response to all this.
Well, he doesn't seem to have any criticism of it. The same is true of a lot of people in Silicon Valley and in business. I don't know, maybe it's because I was raised in the 80s and 90s with all these patriotic Cold War movies like Rambo and, I thought everyone was going to stand up and fight for democracy. When the villain shows up who hates all of our ideas and tries to overthrow our country, we're going to all be brave. And instead, you've got, Tim Cook, or as Trump calls him, Tim Apple, giving him gold trinkets, people praising him, standing with him in the White House. No one has anything to say about the fact that there are masked men with guns kidnapping people off of the streets, that the Constitution and the law are being disregarded every day, that Trump's threatening to end elections and remain president beyond his second term. It's pretty amazing. But Peter Thiel is also one of these people who's mostly silent these days, but his works are all around us. A lot of what we see happening now, this idea of a post-democratic American society ruled by tech oligarchs, is an idea that Peter Thiel has been pursuing for almost 30 years now. The idea that a cognitive elite, a term directly taken from eugenics, should be the ones running the country, right? He literally handmade, cultivated, and crafted JD Vance, who is now our vice president. He plucked Yarvin out of obscurity and made sure that others in Silicon Valley and in politics, including Vance, took up his ideas and used them as a template for how to create the future. And so in the course of writing my book, I didn't expect this when I started. It's amazing the degree to which Peter Thiel is at the center of all this. People look at Elon Musk because he's loud and destructive, but he's not the brain behind this. There's a strategy here. There's a much bigger idea, and it goes beyond Yarvin. It's this idea called the network state, this idea that the money and the influence networks that Silicon Valley has amassed make them like a nation. And they should be able to break off and form their entirely separate political entity outside of democracy, outside of law, outside of taxation, and from there become the biggest power in the world, rivaling China, rivaling Russia, as the United States and the dollar, because crypto is a big part of their dream, become dominant. That's the basic idea there, is that, in Silicon Valley and venture capital, we have this idea called exit. That's when you invest in a company and you cash out and take your money and leave it. They want to exit the United States. They want to cash out all of the money they've made and have stolen from us. And they want to go and do their own thing now and leave us to flail and rot and fail in the end. And as far as I can tell, this idea has largely been pushed and promoted very successfully by Peter Thiel.
And what I just add and edit, and you know this because you've studied it, I would say they're not even just trying to cash out of America. I would say they're trying to cash out of Earth and humanity.
Oh, definitely. That's why I say when you look at what they talk about, going to Mars, living forever, eating the stars of the universe, they have this idea that melding with AI and becoming superhuman. Why are they allowed to have all of these post-human, post-democracy ideas, but no one else is allowed to have very simple ideas like daycare or a municipal funded grocery store, right? It's much more reasonable to say that we can create daycare for the parents in a city than to say we can have life on Mars, which is not going to happen. But instead, they monopolize conceptions of the future, pushing them toward the dystopian ideas. So I was thinking of a few ideas I have for the future. And some people would say they're ridiculous. At the same time, remember, the whole point of the broligarchs is that ridiculous ideas can become reality if enough people believe in them. And so one ridiculous idea.
Hyperstition into reality, Gil. Tell me your
Yeah.
hyperstitions.
Well, one idea I have is for corporate accountability in the future. I think we're going to need a Nuremberg trials, or at least the kind of truth and reconciliation process for all the corporate leaders who went along with this, who stayed silent, who were complicit either through action or inaction as fascism tried to take over the United States. I think we may need a new supermax prison specifically for anti-American billionaires who want to destroy the country, destroy democracy, and get caught red-handed in the act. I think one thing we need is an American Museum of Fascism to remind future generations of what happened during this period of time, what allowed it to get as far as it did, who went along with it, who was silent, who failed in their task of protecting American democracy. And I think we need to teach children in the future that we were susceptible, that we will always be susceptible as long as these massive concentrations of wealth continue to amass in the hands of the few. And I think we need to reckon with the fact that we will always be in grave jeopardy, not only democracy, but the future of humanity itself, as long as we allow these men to amass these cruel amounts of wealth. There is no reason for them to have this much money. What we are learning is that wealth drives people insane, and then they have the power to just try to destroy all of us. So we have to imagine a future without billionaires as well. That doesn't mean kill them. That means we find a way to adjust our reality so that nobody has the power to destroy it for everybody. Because that's the system we have now, and that's what we're learning in this very painful time.
I think when we were talking on Tuesday, I said taxation, regulation, and accountability. But you added one that I'm going to shamelessly borrow and credit you with, is a museum on fascism. I think that will be huge. And to educate our present and future generations about who are the supervillains and the bad guys. And I think what we talked about on Tuesday is that image that I think should be seared into our brain, is that when it came to Donald Trump's inauguration, I've never forgotten it because I want that as evidence for the Nuremberg trials that inshallah should happen in the future, is at the front row of the inauguration. Can you tell him, Gil, who was in the front row of the inauguration?
Oh, the tech oligarchs, right? The Meta, Zuckerberg, all of these people whose lives we're intertwined with every day, right? We're on their products, etc. And not only that, but the military parade Trump threw for his birthday, sponsored by Coinbase and other tech companies, the Epstein Ballroom that he's building, Epstein Ballroom and bunker that he's building, where he tore down the east wing of the White House, completely funded by Silicon Valley corporations, including Microsoft and Apple, I believe.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
This is a massive betrayal of all of us. And we're entwined in it because we use these products. We're the reason that Apple and Microsoft have so much money and so much power in society. And it is shocking to see them bow down. I said this the other night when we were together. It turns out you didn't need to push down the pillars of democracy. They were ready to fall down voluntarily when it came to the media, to corporations, to universities. So I think that there needs to be some accountability. We can't forget what happened right now. This would be a lot harder for Trump if these powerful people in industry and in positions of influence were all saying no very loudly and very publicly. And hopefully that will start to happen as this regime falters, as the polls fall, and people get the sense that grandpa is too sleepy to pull it off. Right? Now, that's not to say that we're out of the woods. There's a lot of danger ahead. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But don't listen to anybody who tells you it's over and that we have no hope.
Yeah, both. You can't have the failure of imagination both ways, in which, everything's fine. And the system will hold and the institutions are going to protect us. No, folks. Those of us who said that said you're suffering from a failure of imagination when you think that fascism can't come to America. We give you the past years. But the flip side is also very important, as Gil said, is that we have every right to imagine a better future where we can have paid parental care guaranteed by the government, where children can go to school that is affordable and get free lunches, where people can say, you know what, I don't have to work to death for scraps. I can have a living wage. Why not? Why not say, inshallah, free buses? Why not? If we can have a trillionaire, why can't we have free buses? It seems less crazy to me, Gil, than a freaking trillionaire who makes money by doing literally nothing. And so we need to also imagine it and force our elected officials to imagine it and be expansive in their vision. Because what elected officials and even Democrats have done, no, now, a living wage is too crazy. Affordable healthcare is too easy. Marriage equality is too slow down. Come on now, we can't have a Green New Deal. Whoa! Don't talk about expanding the Supreme Court. Come on now. Like, and the people are like, shut up. I imagine it. I want it. I can dream it. Let's do it.
Yeah, the mainstream Democratic line has been we have to go toward the center, which means going to the right, always. Notice that the center never means the right goes to the left. It only means that the Democrats go to the right. Meanwhile, the Republicans are having a civil war because half of them want to be Nazis. So I don't think that modeling ourselves after the Republican Party is where it's at, right? And we have to give up on that idea and start envisioning things that are popular, that help people, and that remind people that the role of government is to extend freedom, and that freedom often means healthcare, daycare, the ability to eat, the ability to afford housing, the ability to basically survive. And I think that people will definitely be looking for that after Trump gets through destroying the economy, starving poor people, and making this country feel very chaotic and very weak.
And folks, speaking about the failure of imagination, the broligarchs and MAGA are not suffering from a failure of imagination. And a couple of days ago, both Gil and I kind of reshared this Washington Post article. One of the rare examples that there's a few journalists at the Washington Post doing good work, where the groomers, the funders of JD Vance and the Trump administration openly, and I truly mean openly, shared their supervillain plot. I'm talking about Buskirk and the 1789 Project and his Muslim American ally who funded, along with Rebecca Mercer and Peter Thiel, JD Vance and Trump, and they were in there in 2019, and they've come out, and there was a huge profile done on them. Can you tell us about their plan, which they openly shared, about what they're imagining for the future?
Yeah, well, back in 2019, JD Vance co-founded this thing called the Rockbridge Network, which aimed to take a venture capital approach to politics. This was when JD Vance was pretending to be a venture capitalist. He did have a venture capital firm funded by Peter Thiel, of course. He didn't do very well, and mostly he used it as a springboard to run for office, claiming to be a Silicon Valley success story. Rockbridge, which he founded with a guy named Chris Buskirk, who's very tied into evangelical Christian Republican networks, has this collection of people. Rebecca Mercer, who we remember from the Cambridge Analytica scandal, longtime partner of Steve Bannon. And so they've become this political action committee, and strategic organization that is now getting a lot of buy-in from other tech oligarchs like Mark Andreessen, etc. Well, after founding Rockbridge, this guy Buskirk goes on to found something called 1789 Capital, again funded by Thiel, with Rebecca Mercer, that's investing in patriotic tech. And you're seeing a lot of this alignment. The basic idea is tech companies investing in networks of people and companies that are also very right wing. They're sort of like keeping their money in this right wing circle, pushing right wing ideas. But in this Washington Post profile, Chris Buskirk, who co founded Rockbridge with JD Vance, openly says that we need an aristocracy to run the country. I mean, everywhere you look, they're talking about Nazis, monarchy, dictators, aristocracy. I mean, they're saying this stuff all out loud. I mean, you couldn't have a bigger mistake. And people are picking up on it. The story's going kind of viral. I know people are mad at the Washington Post. I am too. I had unsubscribed actually in September, but I resubscribed for that story, and so that I could be the one to share the free link with my readers. So
Well
we're
done,
doing
sir. Well done.
a group thing. But there is good reporting still being done by some of these reporters, and I'm sure they have to struggle to get it done. But that's a very important thing to keep an eye on. The way that these broligarchs are taking a venture capital approach to politics, making these bets, making big bets that they will somehow have a disruption, right? They're always betting on some company that destroys something, and then they get the benefit of what it destroys, whether it's the taxi industry, the hotel industry. Now they're taking that approach to politics. Like Uber or Airbnb, they have this new approach to, like, what if we took power and made sure it wasn't a democracy anymore? And then we get all the tax breaks and all the power and all the government contracts, and no one can ever stop us again. I think this is literally the approach they're taking. They're making a big bet that this will be their $1 trillion fire hose for the rest of their lives. And I don't think it's going to work out, but I think that's very much the thinking. This venture capital approach to politics, making a big bet on a massive disruption.
And one of their other big bets is JD Vance. And in the chart, JD Vance is described as, quote, the political vehicle. And JD Vance, if everyone's been paying attention, has been a lot more public, especially as Donald Trump is literally sleeping. He's the one who stepped in for Charlie Kirk and hosted Turning Point USA, the radio show or podcast after Charlie Kirk was killed by Tyler Robinson. Because that's what vice presidents do. They end up being podcast hosts. He's the one who's been trolling online. He's the one who gave Erica Kirk that hug. He's the one that Peter Thiel went all in on to the tune of $15 million. Without Peter Thiel, JD Vance does not become vice president. JD Vance is their political vehicle. Talk to us about the JD Vance of it all.
Yeah, JD Vance was just a student at Yale Law School. Peter Thiel came and spoke to his class. Vance was so impressed that he wrote him an email. Thiel invited him to come out and visit him sometime. A few years later, Vance is out in San Francisco working at a venture capital firm that was co-founded by Peter Thiel. Colleagues said they barely remember him in the office. He was too busy pushing his book, which got published while he was working for Thiel, and goes back to Ohio, starts his own fund eventually with help from Peter Thiel. That doesn't do too well, makes a really big, disastrous bet on this indoor agriculture farming situation in Kentucky that ended up burning through a lot of money and failing. And springboards from that to run for Senate. By the way, when he's deciding to run for office, he also undergoes two major conversions. One to Catholicism, which he credits Peter Thiel with putting him on the track to become a late life convert to Catholicism. And two, he converts to Trumpism at the same time, right? Not only does he get God, he gets Trump. And then he runs for Senate in Ohio, probably because he realized that being non-religious and being anti-Trump meant he would never get elected as a Republican in Ohio. And he only gets elected with $15 million in help from Peter Thiel, who also was able to broker a Trump endorsement for Vance, even though Vance had previously, while being this sort of chubby-cheeked, slightly centrist author of Hillbilly Elegy, had compared Trump to Hitler and to heroin and to a disease, right? And now he's praising Trump, getting his endorsement, becomes a senator, and boom, lo and behold, he becomes vice president. But JD Vance is entirely a creation of Peter Thiel, and he has publicly cited the ideas of Curtis Yarvin as important to him as a framework for how to govern. And if he gets into the White House, which I think is an uphill battle for him, it'll be much, much worse than anything you've seen from Donald Trump.
Yep, he's all in with the broligarchy. He's all in with the techno-fascists, and right now he's stuck right now in the middle of this ongoing MAGA civil war, which I have covered, and you all should cover right now, which is between Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and who I would call the rhinos of MAGA. Yes, folks, now we have the rhinos of MAGA, which are folks like Ben Shapiro, Laura Loomer, because she's Jewish, a Jewish white nationalist, Mark Levine, and even now Ted Cruz and others. And you're seeing this play out with the huge controversy happening in the Heritage Foundation, where people are leaving because its president, Kevin Roberts, didn't throw Tucker Carlson under the bus for platforming Nick Fuentes. And now Nick Fuentes says, Groypers, my guys are the neo-Nazis, the accelerationists. We're the future. And he might be right. And I think he is the president and future of the GOP, because they're now trolling Ben Shapiro, and like Ben Shapiro is getting racial. So all of these folks who made their bed with MAGA, the Jewish MAGA, the Indian MAGA, the POC MAGA, leopards eat faces, Gil. And right now, JD Vance is stuck because what Nick Fuentes is saying is that we have him in a vice. He either embraces us or we destroy him. And JD Vance has an Indian American wife, Usha Vance, and he has two children, one of them who's named Vivek. And I think JD Vance, seeing, just listening to what Gil said and knowing anything about his career, if he wants to ascend to the White House, will he give up Usha? I think he'll kick Usha to the curb faster than he can bear hug a couch. But what's your take on that?
Well, like I said, they don't have it all figured out, because if you're gonna run a guy in a partnership with a highly white supremacist, Christo-fascist set of allies, then you need to have all that stuff ironed out, like the personal life. Right now, JD Vance has been publicly saying he hopes his wife will convert to Catholicism.
Yep.
It's not about religion, bro. They hate your skin, right? That's one of the things that some of these right-wing dummies don't seem to understand. It's not about your ideology, right? You will always be another race to them. They hate you for that. And it doesn't matter if you're the hand-chosen puppet of Thiel and if you're willing to carry out all of the right-wing stuff. It goes back to, if people haven't seen it, they should. One battle after another, the Christmas Adventurers Club. We won't give away too much, but these guys are really obsessed with eugenics and with the idea of racial purity. And so we see that JD Vance would appear to be in direct violation of one of the basic tenets of the Nazi MAGA core, right? And so it's a problem.
Nick Fuentes has openly said that from the start and is saying it right now. You are replacing us with your biracial kids. Why did you marry a Hindu? Your wife is brown. How can you be one of us by marrying a Hindu and creating biracial children who are replacing us? And Vivek Ramaswamy is finding out the hard way, because these guys show up and say, you're a Hindu. This is a white Christian country. Why should we vote for you? And he sits there smiling like this, internally crying. And then Dinesh D'Souza, who's brown skin, is now, I don't know if you saw this, but you know what? Let me be petty, Gil. After helping create this modern MAGA movement, literally spending his life from Dartmouth onward, going to jail for MAGA. Now he's like, hey guys, why are you saying this to me? Hey, I thought this is not the conservative movement that I support. And they're like, shut up, you Indian Jeet. Shut up, go back to India. So yeah, as Gil said, at the end of the day, you ain't one of them. And JD Vance, you're married to a brown woman. So if you want to become president, my prediction is he's going to have to kick Usha to the curb. Other people said, no, they'll come around and accept him if he's the heir apparent of Trump. I said, nope, not this young MAGA core. They will not. He will have to give up Usha. And this is where we are, folks, with the broligarchy. I want to ask you this final question, though. Speaking about California, our hometown, which sadly has created these supervillains who might destroy us, but also many people see to lead the resistance, and Gavin Newsom has come out. Your take on Gavin, if he's the leader of the resistance, and if he isn't, why isn't he?
Well, it's great that he doesn't want to be a right-wing podcaster anymore because he tried that for a while. And just to be clear, I've been watching Gavin Newsom's career since he was on the board of supervisors in San Francisco. That's 25 years or so now. So I'm very familiar with his entire career. And we kind of came up in California politics together. I worked for Jerry Brown, other politicians, but Gavin was always in the mix. Gavin was going to run against Jerry Brown for governor, and then he got out because Jerry would have beaten him back in the day. But here's my problem with Gavin Newsom. He's the governor of California, the home of Silicon Valley. A lot of this fascism is being driven by Silicon Valley, by CEOs at tech companies, by venture capitalists who he knows by name and probably has texted with. He doesn't have one word of criticism for any of them.
Nope.
And that's very suspicious to me, because if you think you can take on this authoritarian fascist movement without taking on the broligarchs, you fundamentally misunderstand the situation. And so it's very strange to me that nobody in California politics is willing to take on these guys. Instead, Silicon Valley for them is about innovation. It's about, crypto's about innovation. No, Silicon Valley is about fascism until further notice. And I don't think we can trust somebody as our future leader if they're not willing to say that, if they're not willing to take that on. And it's not just about name calling or whatever. As governor, he has a tremendous amount of power to name and shame these people and to modify their behavior through stigmatization, and he's not doing it. Probably because he wants to run for president with their money. And that's a pretty terrible idea.
I remember we talked about it briefly when we were in conversation a couple of days ago. And the reason why I think Gavin Newsom isn't the future is a lot of things are going to change, folks, in the next 2 years, inshallah, when we have elections. Things are going to get far worse. You cannot suffer from a failure of imagination that, everything will be fine, inshallah, don't worry, the center will hold. No, things are going to get far worse. This is, as Gil said, and it's a great movie. I saw it twice, one battle after another. And you're already seeing it right now. If you saw Democracy-ish with me and Danielle at 12 o'clock, we brought all the receipts to show you where the economy is. And this is before Medicaid gets cut. And this is before the permanent tax cuts to the rich. And this is before the doubling up of healthcare premiums, right? It's going to get worse. And as it gets worse and people get more radicalized, you cannot run, I believe, as a Democratic leader and say, I'm going to bring reform, but I'm going to suck at the teat of AI and crypto and the broligarchs. You just can't. And at the same time, Gavin Newsom short-circuited recently, as did Cory Booker, as did Pete Buttigieg, when it came to the question of Israel and AIPAC. When he was talking to Van Lathan, the good Van, and Van Lathan sincerely asked him, about AIPAC. He wasn't trolling him. I talked to Van on Francesca's show. He was like, I was sincerely asking him. And then Gavin Newsom said, remember, Gil, interesting. That's interesting you bring that up. It's interesting. It's very interesting. He said it again and again and again. And the person who also short-circuited was Cory Booker, and the other person who short-circuited was Pete Buttigieg. You've seen all the data. This is a Gaza generation. You've seen all the polls. You cannot bear hug Israel and AIPAC anymore. So he's still bear hugging Israel and AIPAC. He's still bear hugging the broligarchy. And as Gil said, because we keep receipts, he decided after Donald Trump's election to create a podcast, and he decided that his first guest would be Steve Bannon, and he decided that his second guest would be Charlie Kirk, where he agreed with Charlie Kirk and threw the transgender community under the bus. And what Mamdani shows is that you can't throw people under the bus. You have to bring everyone on the bus towards a better future, towards affordability. So I think for Gavin Newsom, if he sees where the wind is blowing and he does want to run for office, Gil, it's going to be very curious how he can reconcile that with his forever fidelity to the broligarchs, tech, and AIPAC. Let's see. And I was on the Bay Bridge for the first time in a while because for this event, and I think I counted 5 AI billboards on the Bay Bridge within a span of half a mile, Gil. Maybe there were 4. So Ro Khanna, who's come on the show before, anyone from California, Adam Schiff, Gavin Newsom, if you think you got the pulse of the people, but that means you're still going to be buddy-buddy with Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and the broligarchy, think twice. Gil, final word to you, sir.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons they're so afraid of these guys is because of their money. But Mamdani shows that you don't need their money if you have real leadership. You don't need their money if you have a message that resonates with people. And if people know you don't need their money, they believe in you even more. So once I get done with my book, believe me, I'm going to spend a lot of time during Gavin Newsom's last year making sure people know exactly where he stands on Silicon Valley. Because to me, this all started when he allowed Elon Musk to reopen his Tesla factory during the pandemic lockdowns against the law, against the rules, and nobody did anything about it. And that showed that a billionaire can do whatever they want in California. And here we are 5 years later, and who's running roughshod over the entire government? Elon Musk. And you can read about that in my book sometime next year, The Nerd Reich, Silicon Valley Fascism, and the War on Democracy.
And that Tesla plant, sadly, is my hometown of Fremont. So I always feel like I have to go extra hard against Musk, and I have to go extra hard against the broligarchy because I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I was there for 32 years, and the Bay Area sadly has produced the world's supervillains, who are bringing about, literally, folks, are trying to bring about fascism, and according to their own words, an aristocracy. And so I refuse to let them be the representatives of California. And if we created them as Californians, then damn it, we should be the ones who help destroy them as well. But that's just me. Nerdreich is also the name of Gil's fantastic site. Strongly recommend you all listen to, go there and read. And I owe Gil now, I think, a jacket or a mug because he's officially, I think he's part of the 4-timer club. And if we include his moderation, now he's part of the 5-timer club of the Left Hook for the past year. Every time he comes on, people love him. So please follow Gil, and I can't wait to read the book. And I'm saying it here first, shamelessly, as a son of an immigrant, I better get an advance press copy. In exchange, I will give you a blurb if my word means anything and can help you. It might not help you. In fact, you might want to be far, far away from me in a year from now, Gil. Let's see. Folks who joined us, nearly 1,200 people. I'm talking to Gil Duran about the broligarchy, about their techno-fascist plans for the future that they're literally admitting. But in a moment of hope, how we actually have the numbers and the better story, and we can defeat them. And now you're seeing cracks, not just in MAGA, but also in the broligarchy, and you're seeing some of them bend the knee to Mamdani and the economic populist message. So it's a brave new world, folks. There's more of us than there are of them. This is where we have to apply the pressure right now, folks. Right now, apply the pressure. Be kind to each other. Be informed. This is the Left Hook. If you can, become a paid subscriber. If not, it's okay. Go buy Gil's book when it comes out instead. And please, oh please, don't be a fascist. Thank you, Gil. As always.
Thank you.